So today I'm going to be showing you how I made this crochet flower blanket. First I start off with the magic loop. Then I chain 3 and put 11 double crochet inside the magic loop. I titled this video Intermediate Advanced because it's not for absolute beginners, even though it is fairly straightforward. I think you need to have the basics of crochet down before you kind of attempt to do this, but I mean, if you're feeling bold, go for it. Make sure you count, have all 11 double crochet plus the chain 3 for a total of 12 posts, and then I slip stitch into the chain 3, chain 1, and bind off, or snip. And there are a couple different ways to join in for the petal color. This is just the way that I do it. I also don't go into the chain 3. The first one that I go into is actually the first double crochet that I do. It's just a little bit easier. You have to put a bunch of stitches into the same stitch. So yeah, that's how I bind off. That's how I join my new petal yarn. And I'm using like an ivory color. It's really pretty. So go ahead and chain 4 to count as the first treble crochet. And then you're going to put 4 more treble crochet inside that same stitch. So that's why I like to go into the first double crochet, because it's a little bit looser than the top of the chain. So it just makes for an easier time. And then after you finish the 4th treble crochet, you should have 5 posts. Then you're gonna draw up the yarn just a little bit and then take your hook out. Go ahead and slide into the top of the chain 4. So not the first treble crochet, but the top of the chain. Draw up that loop, pull through, and then go ahead and chain 2. And that's how you make each petal. You're gonna go ahead and do that for each of the 12 double crochet in the magic loop. So yeah, 5 treble crochet into the next stitch. I really like this yarn too, by the way. It's like a cotton yarn. Although it does split on me a couple times, I really like the way it feels and the way it looks. And number 5, I think. Go ahead and drop that loop, slip into the top of the first treble crochet. Grab your working loop, pull through, chain 1, chain 2, and repeat. This is actually going to be a baby blanket for my niece, so I chose to use cotton yarn because I felt like it was a little bit more durable. And you know, babies can be messy, so I wanted my sister to be able to just throw it in the wash and have it not fall apart. So here I'm going to show you the last 2 petals. Yeah. And I'm making sure that I have 11 and number 12. It's also really important that you slip into the petal, slip into that first stitch from the front to the back. Otherwise your petal will fold the wrong way, and you want them all to fold towards the back so you get that nice little kind of bubble shape. Chain 2, and then I'm gonna slip stitch between the first and second petal. So I'm not gonna go into the chain itself, I'm just gonna go into the space between the 2 petals. It's much faster, and it's gonna get covered up by the granny square portion anyway, so it's not super critical that you go into the chain. Slip stitch, chain 1, and then cut your yarn. Sewing your tails. I'm going to say that throughout the whole video, sewing your tails. Each flower square has about 6 tails, and each granny square has 2. So if you wait till the end to sew in all your tails, you're going to be there for a good while. I just recommend getting into the habit of, sewing in your tails as you go, so they're not all just bunched up at the end. And then for some reason, the first one I did had a little opening, like a little gap in it, so I redid it. I just forgot to record. Alright, now you're going to join between any 2 petals you want. And we're going to do the granny square portion. This is where I chain 3, and then do 2 double crochet into the same space for a total of 3 posts. Chain 1, and then go into the next space. 3 double crochet, and this is going to be a corner, so we're going to chain 2 and then put 3 more double crochet in that same space. Chain 1, 3 double crochet in the next petal space, chain 1 again, and then do the same thing. And now we're coming up on a corner. 3 double crochet, followed by chain 2, and then 3 more double crochet into the same petal space. You're going to repeat that pattern all the way around to get the first row of the granny square portion. Well, that's another thing I don't care for about this yarn. It comes on cones, even though it has a lot of yarn. And it's a good price. It comes on a cone, and so I can't have the yarn level with me where I'm working. It has to be like lower on the floor. So that's why I take some off and just like ball it up so I can work with it. It's going to be a little bit wonky because the granny square portion, it's a square shape, and you're putting it on the circular flower, so it's going to have a little bit of lumps to it, and then adding the second row of the granny square portion really helps to level everything out and just kind of reinforce that square shape. I also chose to do ivory petals because I wanted it to look like daisies, but I mean, you can use any color for the flower petals and I'm sure it would look just as pretty. I stitched the blanket together with the same ivory color, so it kind of has a cool contrast. Alright, and this is the last corner piece. Go ahead and chain 1, 3 more double crochet, chain 1, and then slip into the first post, which should be a chain 3. Draw up your yarn, chain 1, and now we're going to continue on to the second row. And I'm just double checking all my corners, making sure that they're evenly spaced, and then I can kind of start to see the square, the squared corners kind of taking shape. Alright, so after you did the chain 1, I went ahead and chained 2 more and a third one for a total of 4. So that 3 of those chains count as the first post. And then I'm going to continue with the granny square pattern all the way around, putting 3 double crochet in every space, and in the corners I'm going to do 6 double crochet separated by a chain 2. And here as I'm coming up on the edge, the chain 4 that I started with is going to count as the last post. So in that last space I only did 2 double crochet, and then I slip stitch around that chain 4, and then I bound off. Snip, snap, snip, snap. And sew in your tails. I think it's easier to sew in your tails, especially on the flower portion. There's just so much yarn down there, like in bulk, so you can really easily hide a tail. And the granny square portion too, it has like a lot of posts that you can just kind of slip under and into, go around. And because it's cotton yarn, it's really like thick and it holds onto itself, so you don't really have to do too many roundabouts with the needle. And snip. So that was the petal square. This is just going to be a regular old granny square to match. The first 4 rows of the granny square are going to equal the flower portion in the other square, but it's not an exact match. So what I mean by that is if you do 6 rows of a granny square, you'll have the same number of stitches around the edge as the flower petal square, but it won't be the exact same size. So it didn't really bother me too much. I kind of fixed it when I stitched the squares together, but if it does bother you, I would suggest the 6th row of the granny square, instead of doing double crochets, I would just do half double. That way it's just a little bit shorter all the way around. But yeah, I used the same size hook and the same size yarn, and it just was a little bit off for me. Not terribly, not too much, but just enough to notice when you're holding the 2 pieces next to each other. And this is just your basic granny square pattern. I did a magic loop and then did sections of 3 double crochet separated by chain 2. Some TV magic for you, getting all the way to the 6th row, slipping that stitch, binding off, and of course sewing your tails. I left footage of me sewing in all of my tails just because I wanted to emphasize that I think it's really important. You just have to get into the habit of doing it. I mean, how many projects do you have right now that are almost finished? You just haven't sewn in the tails. That's something that I do also when I stitch pieces together. I take the distance that I'm going to be stitching and I just multiply it times 3 so that for the yarn that I'm using. So you saw me measuring out the width of the squares 3 times, and that's when I knew how much yarn to cut, just as a general rule of thumb. Each corner has 2 chains in it, so if you start in one of the chains on either square, you should have the exact same number of stitches down the side. And I just kind of spiral through. I don't do anything fancy. I just take that yarn and spiral through the tops of each stitches, through the back loops of each stitch. All the way down until you get to the very end. Slip stitch and then sew in your tail. And now we're going to add a border. Go ahead and join into the corner and do a row of single crochet all the way around. Most borders tell you to do this, which is pretty common. I don't like to do the single crochet into the chain 1 space, into the actual chain itself. I just go into the space below. It's so much faster and you can't really tell. I was lucky to find this kind of like speckled yarn that had little pops of magenta and lavender in it, and it really matched the blanket that I made kind of perfectly, so I was happy with that. Slip stitch to join, and now we're going to do the border portion. This is where I modified the tutorial that I saw. I used single crochets instead of double crochets, just because I thought the double crochets were a little bulky. So you're going to do a single crochet in the first 4 stitches, chain 4, and then you're going to slip stitch into the first single crochet from the front to the back, drawing up your working yarn, pull through, and you're supposed to chain 1 and do 7 double crochet. I messed up, but I didn't catch it. I think I was just too worried about showing you how to do the border. I forgot that little portion. So yeah, before you do 7 double crochets into that loop you made, you want to chain 1 just to kind of secure it. And then you're going to do 4 single crochet in each of the next 4 stitches. Oh, at least I caught that mistake. So right there's the next space, 1, 2, 3, and then after the 4th one, you're going to chain 4 again. And this time, instead of slipping into the first single crochet, you're actually going to slip stitch around the previous loop, the previous chain 4 that you made. From right to left, drop your yarn. That's where you should chain 1, which I didn't do. You should have chained 1 there, and then go ahead and put 7 double crochet around the loop. 3. I wrote it out right in the text, but I definitely didn't do it correctly. After the 7th double crochet, you're going to go into the next space and go ahead and do 4 single crochet again, 1 in each of the next 4 spaces. After the 4th one, chain 4, and then go ahead and slip stitch around the previous loop, around the previous chain 4. Yep, drop your yarn, do a chain 1 first before you do the 7 double crochet. And you're going to follow that pattern all the way around the border, even on the corners. The shells have enough give that the corner doesn't really affect it. It kind of helps give it that rounded shape. So this is me at the end. I didn't have a perfect number of stitches. I think I had 1 or 2 extra spaces. So instead of doing 4 single crochet, I actually did a 5th one. So you can tell that last little loop is just a touch longer than the rest. Oh, I did the chain 1 there. So yeah, I'm doing 7 double crochet into that loop, but you can see it's just a little bit looser than the rest. That's because I did 5 instead of 4. But what I do is I use the tail end to kind of sew it down, and also to sew the overlap with the first shell. Slip stitch into the first shell, cut off your yarn, and I left a little bit of a longer tail just because I knew I was going to have to sew down that shell and kind of force the overlap between the first and the last shell. So I take a bite out of it just a little bit, just where I want the overlap to happen. And because it's cotton yarn, it really does kind of behave well. It does pretty much whatever you want it to. I don't have to secure it too much. Just a couple turns of the needle, and it really holds its shape. And that's basically what I did to create the blanket. This is just a small little section. Later in the video, I'll show you the pattern that I followed. I just kind of put something together on Photoshop. I'm not a professional Photoshop artist whatsoever. So you can see it's a little crunchy, but that's just the basic colorway that I followed. And now for the final result.